It was just another Tuesday morning at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. The kind of morning where business people rushed through security with their laptops and coffee, families herded excited kids toward their gates, and flight crews moved through their routines with practiced efficiency. Nobody expected this particular flight to Chicago to become anything other than ordinary. Malia and Sasha Obama walked through the terminal with the quiet confidence of young women who had grown up in extraordinary circumstances, but desperately wanted ordinary moments. Now adults, they had learned to navigate the world beyond the White House walls, though their lives would never be completely normal. A few discreet Secret Service agents flanked them at a respectful distance, trained to blend into crowds while remaining vigilant. The sisters were heading to Chicago for a family visit, something they tried to do whenever their schedules allowed. They had specifically chosen a commercial flight instead of private transportation. After years of living under the intense spotlight of being the president's daughters, they craved these small tastes of regular life. Flying commercial, standing in line at coffee shops, walking through airports like everyone else. These were the moments that made them feel connected to the world they'd been sheltered from during their father's presidency. As they boarded the aircraft, other passengers glanced up from their phones and magazines. A few did double takes, recognition flickering across their faces. Some smiled warmly. Others pretended not to notice, respecting their privacy. The sisters had grown accustomed to this dance of recognition and polite distance. They appreciated when people gave them space to just be themselves. They settled into their first-class seats, grateful for the extra room and relative privacy. Sasha pulled out her earbuds while Malia opened a book she'd been trying to finish for weeks. They chatted quietly about their weekend plans, discussing which of their favorite Chicago spots they wanted to visit and which old friends they hoped to see. For a few moments, they were just two sisters excited about a trip home. Meanwhile, at the front of the aircraft, a young flight attendant named Christina was running through her pre-flight checklist with meticulous attention to detail. This was only her second month with the airline, and she was determined to prove herself. She'd worked hard to get this job, going through months of rigorous training, memorizing safety protocols, and learning to handle every possible scenario that might arise at 30,000 feet. Christina took her responsibilities seriously, perhaps too seriously for someone still learning the rhythm of the job. Her trainer had emphasized the importance of following procedures exactly, of checking and double-checking everything, of never assuming anything. Those lessons echoed in her mind as she moved through the cabin, verifying seat assignments against her passenger manifest. She had dreamed of being a flight attendant since she was a little girl, watching planes take off from her bedroom window and imagining all the places they were going. Now here she was living that dream, and she wasn't going to mess it up by being careless or cutting corners. Every passenger in their correct seat, every safety demonstration performed perfectly. Every regulation followed to the letter. As Christina approached the first-class section, she noticed the two young women in seats 2A and 2B. She glanced down at her tablet, scrolling through the seat assignments, her brow furrowed slightly. According to her manifest, those seats showed a different booking reference than what she expected. The system indicated these seats had been specially reserved under a particular code, and the names didn't seem to match up properly. She looked at the two passengers again, not really seeing them as individuals, just as a discrepancy that needed to be resolved before takeoff. Her training kicked in. When something doesn't match the manifest, you clarify it. Simple as that. She had no idea who these passengers were, and in her nervous focus on getting everything right, she didn't stop to wonder why several serious-looking men in dark suits were positioned strategically nearby. Christina approached the sisters with what she hoped was a professional but friendly smile. "Excuse me, ladies," she said politely. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to check something with your seat assignments." Malia looked up from her book and Sasha pulled out one earbud. They'd been through various travel mix-ups before and knew the drill. Usually it took about 30 seconds for someone to realize who they were, check with a supervisor, and sort everything out. "There seems to be a booking issue," Christina continued, her voice becoming slightly more anxious. She really didn't want to start her day with a problem. "These seats were specially reserved under a different reference code, and I'm going to need to ask you to move to your assigned seats in row 8. The Secret Service agents nearby exchanged quick glances. They knew what was happening, but their job was to protect, not to interfere with airline operations unless absolutely necessary. One agent shifted his weight slightly, ready to intervene if the situation escalated, but for now he remained silent. Malia and Sasha looked at each other, and a flicker of amusement passed between them. They'd seen this movie before. Someone didn't recognize them, treated them like regular passengers, and then the inevitable moment of realization would come. Usually it was awkward but harmless. They actually didn't mind too much. It was refreshing to be treated like everyone else, even if only for a few minutes. "I think there might be a mistake with the booking system," Malia said gently, trying to give Christina an easy way to check again without making a big deal of it. But Christina, focused entirely on her checklist and worried about delaying the flight, heard this as resistance. She'd been warned in training about passengers who might argue about seat assignments, who might claim there was an error when they simply wanted better seats. She straightened her spine slightly, trying to project authority she didn't quite feel yet. "I understand, but these seats have been reserved through a special booking code, and federal aviation regulations require all passengers to be in their correctly assigned seats before departure," she explained, her voice growing a bit firmer. "I really do need you to gather your belongings and move to row 8. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Other first-class passengers were starting to pay attention now. A businessman across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A woman 2 rows back paused her phone conversation and craned her neck to see what was happening. Several people clearly recognized the 2 young women, but nobody said anything. It was like watching a movie where you could see the plot twist coming, but the characters couldn't. One passenger slowly reached for his phone, sensing that something interesting was about to unfold. Another woman leaned over to her husband and whispered something, nodding toward the sisters. The cabin had that particular energy that comes right before something unexpected happens, when a normal moment is about to become a memorable one. Christina's supervisor, an older woman with 20 years of experience, heard the exchange and moved closer to assist. She glanced at the 2 passengers, then at the nervous young flight attendant, then back at the passengers. As she got closer, something about the situation began to feel off to her. The way those men in suits were positioned. The way some passengers were watching with knowing expressions. The booking code on the manifest that looked vaguely familiar. But before she could say anything, Christina pressed forward, genuinely believing she was doing the right thing. "Ladies, I'm going to have to insist. We need to close the cabin door and prepare for departure, and I can't do that until everyone is in their proper seat." The tension in first class was rising, not from anger, but from anticipation. Everyone except Christina seemed to know that something significant was about to happen. And then, from the front of the plane, they heard it, the sound of footsteps on the jet bridge, heavier and more purposeful than typical passenger footfalls. The captain's voice crackled over the PA system. "Flight attendants, we have one more passenger boarding. Please remain standing by." That was unusual. The flight was supposed to be fully boarded. Christina glanced toward the aircraft door, confused, still completely unaware that her ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary. Christina turned toward the aircraft door, expecting to see just another business traveler rushing to make their flight. But something felt different. The air in the cabin had changed somehow, like everyone was holding their breath at once. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the energy had shifted in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The supervisor stepped closer, her experienced eyes fixed on the boarding door. She had that look people get when they suddenly realize they've made a terrible mistake, but it's too late to fix it. Her face had gone pale, and she reached out as if to touch Christina's arm, to warn her, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Several passengers in first class had turned completely around in their seats now, staring at the entrance. A few were smiling, that knowing kind of smile people get when they're watching something unfold that they saw coming from a mile away. Others had pulled out their phones, not in an obvious way, but discreetly angling them toward the front of the plane. Something big was about to happen, and everyone seemed to know it except Christina. Malia and Sasha hadn't moved from their seats. They sat there calmly, exchanging another one of those quick sibling glances that communicated an entire conversation without words. They'd been through situations like this before, though perhaps not quite this awkward. There was a hint of amusement in their eyes, but also something gentler, an understanding that the young flight attendant was about to have one of those moments that changes your entire day, maybe even your entire perspective. The Secret Service agents had shifted their positions subtly. To most people, they might have looked like they were just adjusting their stances. But anyone trained to read body language would recognize it immediately. They were preparing for something, moving into a formation that was both protective and welcoming. More agents than had been visible before seemed to materialize from various points in the cabin. Christina noticed this movement and felt a flutter of confusion in her chest. Why were there so many of these serious-looking men? Why did they all seem to be moving with such coordinated purpose? Her training had covered difficult passengers, medical emergencies, even security threats, but nothing had prepared her for this particular feeling of being completely out of the loop while everyone else was in on something. The footsteps from the jet bridge grew louder. They weren't rushed, but they had weight to them, authority. Christina could hear voices now, too, quiet and respectful, the kind of murmurs that happen when someone important is passing by. She glanced at her supervisor again, whose expression had moved beyond pale to something approaching panic mixed with resignation. "Christina," the supervisor finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those passengers in 2A and 2B." But she didn't get to finish her sentence. The footsteps had reached the aircraft door. Time seemed to slow down in that peculiar way it does when something significant is happening. Christina watched as a figure stepped through the doorway, and her brain struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. It was like those optical illusions where you see one thing at first, and then suddenly your perception shifts and you see what was really there all along. The man who entered the aircraft was tall, with an easy confidence in his movements. He wore a casual leather jacket over a button-down shirt, looking more like someone heading to a family gathering than anything else. But there was something unmistakable about him, something that made him impossible to misidentify once you actually looked. Barack Obama stepped fully into the first-class cabin, and the entire atmosphere changed in an instant. Christina felt her stomach drop so fast she thought she might actually be sick. Her hands, which had been holding her tablet with such professional firmness just moments ago, started to shake. The device nearly slipped from her grasp. Every single cell in her body suddenly understood the magnitude of what she had just done. She had just demanded that the former president's daughters move from their seats. She had insisted, even when they tried to gently explain. She had been about to file a complaint for non-compliance. The former president smiled at various passengers who were now openly staring, some with phones raised, others frozen in disbelief. He gave a small wave, acknowledging their attention without making a big show of it. Then his gaze landed on his daughters, still seated in 2A and 2B, and then on Christina standing over them, tablet in hand, looking like she wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice carrying that distinctive tone that millions of people would recognize instantly. There was no anger in it, no irritation. If anything, there was a hint of amusement, like a parent who walks in to find their kids in the middle of some harmless mischief. Christina couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She had imagined many scenarios for how her aviation career might unfold. Dealing with turbulence, handling difficult passengers, maybe even emergency situations. Never, not in her wildest imagination, had she pictured this. She tried to say something, anything, but her voice had completely abandoned her. The supervisor jumped in, trying to explain and apologize simultaneously. "Mr. President, I am so sorry. There's been a misunderstanding with the seat assignments." Christina was following protocol, but she didn't realize. Barack Obama raised his hand gently. "It's okay," he said, and those two simple words released all the tension in the cabin. "Really, it's all right." He looked at Christina directly. She expected anger or disappointment, but that's not what she saw at all. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. "Christina," she managed to whisper. "Christina," he repeated, giving her name weight and recognition. "You were just doing your job, weren't you? Making sure passengers were in their correct seats, following the regulations, keeping things safe and organized." She nodded, unable to form proper sentences. Tears were starting at the corners of her eyes. This was being wrong in front of dozens of witnesses, in front of a former president, in front of people recording on their phones. Her career felt over before it had really begun. "You didn't recognize my daughters," he continued, gesturing toward Malia and Sasha, who were watching the scene with expressions of sympathy mixed with pride in their father. "And you were making sure that the seat assignments were correct, that everything was by the book." That's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's exactly what we need flight attendants to do. Christina felt a tear escape. But it wasn't just from embarrassment anymore. There was relief too, gratitude, disbelief that this was how he was choosing to handle the situation. Malia spoke up for the first time since her father arrived. "We tried to explain," she said with a gentle smile. "But honestly, it's kind of nice to be treated like everyone else for a change." Sasha nodded in agreement. "Most people either make a huge fuss or pretend they don't see us at all. You just treated us like regular passengers. There's something refreshing about that." The supervisor was looking between the Obama family and Christina with pure amazement. In 20 years of flying, she had never seen anything like this. Other passengers were starting to smile now, too, the tension breaking into something warmer. A woman in row 3 was wiping her eyes. A businessman who had been recording on his phone lowered it slowly, seeming to realize he was witnessing something more important than just another viral video. Barack Obama turned to the supervisor. "So about these seat assignments," he said in a tone that was all business now but still friendly. "I think there was a last-minute booking change that might not have updated properly in the system. Can we sort that out?" The supervisor practically leaped at the chance to fix something, to make this right. "Absolutely, Mr. President. Let me check the manifest right away." Her fingers flew over her own tablet, and Christina could see her scrolling through screens, her professional competence returning now that she had a concrete task to focus on. Christina was still standing there, feeling like she was in some kind of dream. Around her, the impossible was becoming real. The supervisor's fingers moved quickly across her tablet, pulling up booking codes and cross-referencing passenger manifests. Christina stood frozen, watching this all unfold like she was outside her own body. Part of her brain kept insisting this couldn't be real, that she'd wake up any moment in her apartment, getting ready for another normal day of work. "Here it is," the supervisor said, relief flooding her voice. "The booking was made under a Secret Service reference code. It shows a party of 3 for seats 2A, 2B, and 2C. The system update must have been delayed." She looked up at Barack Obama with an apologetic smile. "Everything is in order, Mr. President. Your family's seats are exactly where they should be." Christina felt the weight of her mistake settling over her like a heavy blanket. She'd been so focused on following the rules, so determined to do everything right, that she'd created this entire situation, and now the former President of the United States was standing in front of her, being more gracious about her error than she could have ever imagined. "See?" Barack Obama said, looking at Christina with genuine kindness. "Just a system glitch. Happens all the time with these booking codes. You were absolutely right to check." He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. "The world needs more people who take their responsibilities seriously, who don't just assume everything is fine and actually verify things. You did exactly what you should have done." Christina's voice came back in a rush. "But I didn't recognize. I should have known. I'm so sorry, Mr. President. I'm so sorry to your daughters. I didn't mean to." He held up a hand again, stopping her mid-apology. "Christina, let me tell you something. My daughters have spent a good portion of their lives with people treating them differently because of who I am. Some people freeze up around them. Some people try too hard to impress them. Some people take photos without asking. You know what you did? You treated them like passengers who needed to be in the right seats. You treated them exactly the same as you'd treat anyone else." He smiled. "That's actually pretty great." Malia leaned forward in her seat. "Seriously, don't feel bad. We've had flight attendants practically bow when we walk past. We've had pilots announce our presence over the PA system without asking. One time someone tried to upgrade us even though we specifically didn't want to be upgraded." She laughed at the memory. "This is honestly not even in the top 10 most awkward flight situations we've been in." Sasha nodded enthusiastically. "Not even close. Remember that time in Europe when that guy followed us around the airport taking pictures for like an hour? Oh, that was terrible." Malia agreed, then turned back to Christina. "This is nothing, really." Around them, the other first-class passengers were relaxing too. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something warmer, a shared recognition that they were witnessing something special. A man across the aisle spoke up, his voice tentative but earnest. "If I may, Mr. President, what you just did there, that was really something. A lot of people would have made this young lady feel terrible." Barack Obama turned to acknowledge him. "Why would I do that?" She was doing her job and doing it well. We should be thanking her, not making her feel bad. The supervisor, who had been quiet during this exchange, found her voice. Christina has been with us for 2 months, and she's been excellent. Very thorough, very professional. This just proves it. Christina felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different. These were tears of relief and gratitude, of being seen and valued when she'd expected to be reprimanded. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice steadier now. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll never forget this." "I don't think any of us will," a woman in row 4 said with a warm smile. Several other passengers murmured their agreement. Barack Obama glanced at his watch, then at the supervisor. "We should probably get settled so this flight can take off. I'm sure the pilots are wondering what's taking so long." The supervisor practically jumped into action. "Yes, absolutely, Mr. President. Christina, why don't you help Mr. Obama get settled and I'll make the final cabin checks." Christina's eyes went wide. After everything that just happened, they wanted her to personally assist him? She looked at her supervisor, then at the former president, waiting for someone to laugh and say they were joking. But Barack Obama just smiled and picked up his small carry-on bag. "Lead the way, Christina." She moved on autopilot, her training kicking in. "Your seat is right here, Mr. President. Let me help you with your bag." "I've got it," he said easily, lifting his bag into the overhead compartment himself. "But thank you." As he settled into seat 2C next to Sasha, the cabin seemed to collectively exhale. The Secret Service agents took their positions in nearby seats, professional and unobtrusive. Other passengers began to settle back into their own spaces, though many kept glancing over. Still unable to quite believe who was sitting just a few rows away, Christina started to move away, but Barack Obama called her back. "Christina, one more thing." She turned, her heart rate picking up again. "Yes, sir. You're going to have a great career in this industry," he said. "You care about doing things right. You don't cut corners. You treat people fairly. Those qualities are going to take you far. Don't let anyone tell you different, and don't let this moment make you doubt yourself. Use it to remember why you do what you do." She nodded, not trusting her voice to stay steady if she tried to speak. He gave her a final warm smile, then turned to his daughters, immediately falling into comfortable family conversation. As Christina made her way back to the galley, her legs felt shaky. The supervisor met her there, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "I think so," Christina said, though she wasn't entirely sure. "Did that really just happen?" "It really did. And you handled it beautifully once you realized." "Well, he handled it beautifully, but you recovered well." The supervisor squeezed her shoulder. "Take a breath. We still have a flight to operate." Christina nodded, focusing on the familiar routine of pre-flight duties. Check the galley. Verify emergency equipment. Prepare for the safety demonstration. As she moved through the cabin doing final checks, passengers kept catching her eye and smiling. A few gave her encouraging nods. One older gentleman gave her a thumbs up. The supervisor's voice came over the intercom, addressing the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be departing shortly. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure." Christina took her position at the front of first class for the safety demonstration. As she went through the familiar motions, pointing out exit rows, demonstrating oxygen masks, showing how to fasten seat belts, she was acutely aware of the Obama family watching along with everyone else. But they weren't watching her any differently than the other passengers were. They were just 3 people on a flight to Chicago, paying attention to the safety briefing like they should. When the demonstration finished, Christina took her jump seat for takeoff. Through the gap between seats, she could see Malia and Sasha chatting quietly, both looking relaxed. Barack Obama had pulled out a book and was already reading, looking for all the world like any other passenger settling in for a routine flight. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, and Christina closed her eyes for a moment. She looked the same as she had an hour ago, but somehow she felt completely different. The engines roared to life, pressing everyone back into their seats as the plane accelerated down the runway. The nose lifted and they were airborne, climbing into the blue sky above Washington. Christina looked out the small galley window at the city falling away below them. She had started this morning as just another flight attendant on just another flight. Now she was the flight attendant who had asked the Obama daughters to move, who had been corrected with such remarkable grace, who had been given a life lesson in humility and professionalism from a former president. Whatever happened next, She knew this was a day she would remember for the rest of her life. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, Christina tried to settle into her normal routine, but nothing about this flight felt normal anymore. Every time she walked through the cabin, she was hyper-aware of the Obama family sitting there, reading and chatting like any other passengers. The difference was that everyone else on the plane was also acutely aware of them. The supervisor approached her in the galley about 20 minutes into the flight. "How are you holding up?" Christina let out a long breath. "I'm not sure. Part of me still can't believe that just happened." "You did, and you handled it with professionalism." The supervisor smiled. "And he handled it like the class act everyone says he is." "I know," Christina said softly. "He turned it into a teaching moment," the supervisor said. "That says more about his character than 1,000 speeches could." Christina nodded. She pulled out her phone during a quiet moment. When she opened social media, her stomach did a flip. The story was everywhere. Videos taken by passengers were going viral. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people were weighing in, most praising her for treating everyone equally and celebrating the Obama family's grace. "Viral yet?" the supervisor asked. "Very," Christina confirmed, showing her the screen. "Welcome to the internet age. By tomorrow, you'll probably be interviewed by news stations." The supervisor wasn't joking. "My advice: stay humble, tell the truth about what happened, and remember what he told you. You were doing your job." Christina put her phone away, deciding not to look at it again during the flight. She needed to focus on the passengers who were here now, not the millions of strangers commenting online. As she made her way through the cabin with the beverage cart, she approached the Obama family's row with her heart pounding. Professional, she reminded herself. Treat them like any other passengers. "Can I offer you something to drink?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Malia looked up with a warm smile. "I'd love some water, please." "Same here," Sasha added. Barack Obama glanced up from his book. "Coffee black." "Thank you, Christina." The fact that he remembered her name, that he used it so naturally, almost undid her composure. She poured their drinks with careful attention, determined not to spill anything with her slightly shaking hands. "How long have you been flying?" Malia asked conversationally as Christina handed her the water. "Just 2 months," Christina admitted. "This is actually my first month on this route." "Well, you're doing great," Sasha said encouragingly. "I mean, aside from the whole trying to move us thing, but we've covered that." She grinned, and Christina couldn't help but laugh. "I'm never going to live that down, am I?" "Probably not," Malia agreed cheerfully. "But in the best way possible. You're going to be telling your grandkids about this someday." As Christina moved on to the next row, she felt something shift inside her. The Obama sisters weren't treating her like someone who had made a mistake. They were treating her like a person, someone worthy of conversation and kindness. It was such a simple thing, but it meant everything. Throughout the flight, small moments kept happening that would stay with Christina forever. She saw Barack Obama help an elderly passenger retrieve something from the overhead bin. She watched Malia share her magazine with Sasha, the two of them laughing over some article together. She noticed how the Secret Service agents remained vigilant but never intrusive, how they managed to protect without smothering. About an hour before landing, something unexpected happened. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, walked up to the Obama family's row. Her mother was right behind her, looking apologetic and nervous. "Excuse me," the little girl said in a small voice. "Are you really the president?" Barack Obama smiled at her warmly. "I used to be the president. Now I'm just a regular person on a flight to Chicago." "My teacher talks about you," the girl continued, gaining confidence. "She says you worked really hard and cared about people." "Your teacher sounds very nice," he replied. "What's your name?" "Lucy." "Well, Lucy, your teacher is right that I tried to care about people. But you know what? Every person can do that. You don't have to be president to make a difference in the world. You just have to care and try your best." The little girl's mother was wiping her eyes. "Thank you," she mouthed to him. "Would you like a photo?" Barack Obama asked Lucy. "If your mom says it's okay?" Lucy's face lit up and her mother nodded enthusiastically. Christina watched as one of the Secret Service agents took the mother's phone and snapped a photo of Lucy, standing next to the former president, both of them smiling. Sasha and Malia joined in too, making silly faces that had Lucy giggling. After Lucy and her mother returned to their seats, more passengers began to approach, one or two at a time. The Obama family was gracious with everyone, taking photos, chatting briefly, signing a couple of napkins and books. They never seemed annoyed or put out, never acted like it was an imposition. Christina found herself thinking about what the supervisor had said earlier. Not everyone would have responded this way. Most people in their position would have hidden behind the Secret Service, would have pulled rank, would have demanded privacy. Instead, they were using this unexpected moment to connect with people, to make memories that these passengers would treasure. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Christina made her way through the cabin one final time, collecting trash and ensuring everyone was prepared for landing. When she reached the Obama family, Barack Obama looked up at her. "Christina, before we land, I wanted to say something," he said. "What happened earlier, that's going to be shared a lot online. People are going to have opinions. Some will be kind, some won't be. But I want you to remember that you did nothing wrong. You were professional. You were following protocols, and you treated my daughters like you'd treat anyone else. That's exactly what should happen." "Thank you, sir," Christina said, her voice thick with emotion. "This has been the most memorable flight of my career." "Ours too," Sasha said with a grin. "And that's saying something." Malia reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "This is our dad's assistant's contact information. If you get any trouble from the airline or anyone else because of this, or if the media attention becomes too much, reach out. We'll help however we can." Christina took the card with trembling fingers. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll remember that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it," Barack Obama said. "And that you'll keep being the kind of professional who cares about doing things correctly." The plane touched down smoothly on the Chicago runway, and passengers began gathering their belongings. The Obama family waited patiently, while most of the other passengers deplaned, continuing to take photos and chat with people who approached them. Christina watched from her position near the exit, amazed at their patience and genuine warmth. Finally, they made their way toward the exit. As they passed Christina, each of them thanked her. Sasha gave her a quick hug. Malia squeezed her hand, and Barack Obama paused to shake her hand firmly. "You're going to do great things in this career," he told her. "I can tell." Then they were gone, walking up the jet bridge surrounded by their security detail, leaving Christina standing there in the doorway of the aircraft, holding a business card and trying to process everything that had just happened. The supervisor appeared beside her. "Well," she said, "that was quite a flight." Christina laughed, and suddenly she was crying too, overwhelmed by emotion. "I thought my career was over. I thought I'd ruined everything. Instead, you just had the experience of a lifetime," the supervisor said, putting an arm around her shoulders, "and learned something valuable about grace under pressure, both giving it and receiving it." As the last passengers deplaned and the cleaning crew began their work, Christina stood there for a moment longer, looking out at the Chicago airport. She thought about the young flight attendant who had boarded this plane in Washington just a few hours ago. So worried about following every rule perfectly, so afraid of making mistakes. That version of herself felt like a different person now. The days following that flight changed Christina's life in ways she never imagined. By the time she landed back in Washington that evening, her phone was flooded with notifications. Text messages from friends and family, emails from news outlets, social media mentions that multiplied by the minute. Her mother called first. "Christina, honey, are you okay? You're all over the news." "Former president," Christina corrected, then laughed. "And yes, Mom, I'm fine. It was the most incredible experience." That night, Christina couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the day in her mind. The business card still sat on her nightstand, a tangible reminder that it had all really happened. The next morning, her supervisor called. "Christina, the airline wants to meet with you." Christina's stomach dropped. Despite everything, she still worried she might be in trouble. When Christina arrived at headquarters, she was escorted to a conference room with several executives, including the Vice President of Customer Service. The VP stood and extended his hand. "Christina, we've been reviewing what happened on your flight." Here it comes, Christina thought. But the VP surprised her. "What was remarkable was how you conducted yourself professionally and followed protocols. You treated every passenger with respect," Christina blinked. "I'm not in trouble." "Not at all. You're exactly the kind of employee we want. President Obama's team reached out this morning to thank us and specifically mentioned you. Christina felt tears forming. They reached out? They did. We're promoting you from probationary status to full employee immediately, and we want you to help train new flight attendants. For a moment, Christina couldn't speak. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over the next few weeks, Christina's story continued to spread. She gave interviews, always with the same honest answers. She talked about the grace and kindness she'd experienced, how Barack Obama had turned an embarrassing moment into a lesson about integrity. The video clips kept circulating online. One passenger wrote a viral post. I watched a young flight attendant make an honest mistake, and I watched a former president respond with nothing but kindness. This is what grace looks like. About a month after the flight, Christina was working another shift when she got an unexpected message on her phone. She didn't recognize the number, but the text made her heart skip a beat. Hi, Christina, this is Malia Obama. My dad wanted me to reach out. There's a leadership conference next month where he's speaking about public service and character. He'd like to invite you to attend as his guest and share your story. No pressure if you're not comfortable, but we all thought it might be meaningful. Let me know. Christina read the message 3 times to make sure it was real. She showed it to her supervisor, who laughed with delight. Are you going to say yes? I don't know, Christina admitted. What would I even say? I'm just a flight attendant who made a mistake. Her supervisor put a hand on her shoulder. You're a professional who did her job with integrity, who treated everyone equally and who had the grace to learn from an awkward moment. That's exactly the kind of story people need to hear. Christina thought about it for the rest of her shift. That evening, she finally replied to the text. I would be honored to attend. Thank you for thinking of me. The conference took place 6 weeks after the original flight. Christina found herself in a large hotel ballroom filled with hundreds of people, educators, community leaders, young activists, and professionals from various fields. She sat in the front row, still not quite believing this was real. When Barack Obama took the stage, the room erupted in applause. He spoke about leadership, about integrity, about treating people with dignity regardless of their position or status. And then, about halfway through his speech, he paused. I want to tell you about something that happened recently, he said. I was flying to Chicago with my daughters, and a young flight attendant approached us about our seats. She didn't recognize my daughters, and she was concerned that there was a booking error. She asked them to move. The audience laughed, but Barack Obama raised his hand. Wait, let me finish. This flight attendant was doing exactly what she should have been doing. She was following protocols. She was making sure passengers were in their correct seats. She wasn't giving anyone special treatment based on who they were or what they looked like. She was just doing her job correctly. He looked directly at Christina, and when she realized the situation, she didn't fall apart. She listened, she learned, and she continued to be professional. That young woman is here today. Christina, could you stand up? Christina's legs felt shaky as she stood. The entire ballroom turned to look at her, and the applause was thunderous. Christina represents something we need more of in this world, Barack Obama continued. She represents integrity. She represents the courage to do your job correctly even when it's difficult. And she represents the ability to learn and grow from unexpected moments. These are the qualities that build strong communities and strong nations. After the speech, there was a reception. Christina found herself surrounded by people wanting to talk to her, to hear her story firsthand, to shake her hand. It was overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Later, Barack Obama found her in the crowd. How are you holding up? He asked with that familiar warm smile. I'm still processing all of this, Christina admitted. A month ago, I was just trying to get through my probationary period. Now I'm at a leadership conference being held up as an example. It's surreal. You earned it, he said simply. You did something that seems simple but isn't. You treated everyone fairly, and you did your job with integrity. Never underestimate the power of that. Malia and Sasha joined them, both giving Christina warm hugs. We've been following your interviews, Sasha said. You've been handling the attention really well. I learned from the best, Christina replied, gesturing to their father. As the evening wound down, Christina found a quiet corner to collect her thoughts. She thought about the young woman who had boarded that flight to Chicago weeks ago, so worried about following every rule, so afraid of making mistakes. She thought about how one uncomfortable moment had changed the trajectory of her entire life. But more than that, she thought about the lesson she'd learned, not just from making a mistake, but from how that mistake had been handled. Grace, kindness, and the understanding that everyone is just doing their best. These were the things that really mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw you on the news again, honey, so proud of you." Christina smiled and typed back, "Love you, Mom. Thank you for always believing in me." As she left the conference that night, walking out into the cool evening air, Christina felt different than she had that morning on the plane. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She was someone who had experienced an extraordinary moment of grace and had chosen to share that lesson with others. The story of the flight attendant who asked the Obama sisters to move had become something bigger than a viral video or an embarrassing mistake. It had become a reminder of what's possible when people choose kindness over anger, understanding over judgment, and grace over pride. And Christina knew that no matter where her career took her, no matter what challenges she faced, she would carry that lesson with her always. The day she thought would end her career had instead taught her the most valuable lesson of all, that how we treat people in difficult moments defines who we really are. 6 months later, Christina was promoted to senior flight attendant and lead trainer. She still flew regularly, still loved her job, and still treated every passenger with the same care and respect. But now when she trained new flight attendants, she had a story to tell them. A story about the day she made a mistake, and about the grace she received in return. It was a story she would tell for the rest of her life.